We started with working capital and went through the various components and the various positions. Then we looked at capital structure, looking really at our proportion, our choice of long-term debt versus equity to finance the growth of the company and the impact on leverage of that. Now we're talking about the third pillar of finance, capital budgeting. Capital budgeting is without a doubt the riskiest of the three main components of finance. Why? Because we're talking about long-term investment. We're talking about investing in projects, investing in ourselves with a useful life of 5 or 10 or even 50 years. If we make the right choices, we will grow our organization exactly as we plan. If we make the wrong choices, we could doom our organization. We literally could drive our company out of business. And the reason is we're locking up a tremendous amount of capital and commitment for investment and expense today in anticipation of returns over a very long period of time. So this is the area we have to really be very careful and methodical in. It's a very important part of every organization. It's a very important part of finance. And I do not want to scare you away from looking at capital investments and capital projects. But we do need to understand the impact. So let's start off by defining what a project is. A project is really an investment. Frequently, it's tangible assets, buildings, production facilities, etc., but it also could be intangible, as in marketing programs. A typical project has 3 or 4 base criteria to get us started. Number one, a very large upfront cost. This is our capital investment. Sometimes that'll be over a given year. Many times that will be over multiple years. It could take 3 or 4 or 5 years to build out some very large projects like a production facility. And we have no inflow, no revenue from that until it becomes commissioned. So there's a commitment to spend very large amounts of money for some period of time before we expect any return. An example is, not far away, they're doing a renovation of an entire pier and commercial district. It's a $300 million capital project. It will take 5 or 6 years to build this out. In that time, there'll be no revenue coming in. There'll only be costs going out. That's definitely a capital project. And for something like that, we need to determine as accurately as we possibly can what all of the cash outflows are going to be and when. That's our investment. What all the capital inflows are going to be. That is the return and the net. From that, we'll be able to determine, at least based on our projection, whether the project makes economic sense or not. To be very clear, capital projects are judged, are evaluated based on their economic or financial return. That's everything we're going to look at. If you have a project where you are using any other criteria from finance, if you're doing a project because of societal good or governmental regulation, you don't really need to worry about the financial return. You're going to do those projects for reasons other than finance, and that's perfectly fine. But when we're looking at a traditional approach to a project, we have to look at what is the expected return compared to the projected investment, and are we meeting our expected annual ROI, or return on investment? So we'll start with a large upfront investment. We'll look for, calculate, forecast a specific amount of cash flow in for each period over the projected useful life. How long will this project be used? Is it a refinery? 50 years. Is it a commercial building? 35 years. Is it a major piece of equipment? 15 years. That specific time period and the annualized cash flows are very important. And again, to be clear on our cash flows, all capital projects are evaluated based on their net cash flows, not income, cash flows. So what are the specific cash flows? Revenues minus expense gets us profit, add back in the non-cash, gets us to our cash flow. The reason for this, cash flows are more complete, they're more realistic, they're less subject to manipulation than is income. That's why. Also, a project has to have a useful life of 5 years or longer, or it's not really a capital project. We have a short-term project of 2 or 3 years. That is not the kind of project we're looking at. And the specific reason is something less than 5 years of life on a project, there's very little risk in there. There's very little need to secure long-term financing. It's more a current need. So those are handled in our current budgeting operation. With capital projects, capital budgeting, we're looking at projects that only have a useful life of 5 years or longer. And the last point's important also. Salvage value is an option to be calculated. The longer the project, the less likely we'll have a salvage value. Salvage value is also referred to as residual value. The salvage value of a project, if there is any, means our estimate today of what the project will be worth in the marketplace when we no longer need it and we sell it to someone else. So if we have a 20-year project, we put 100 million into it, we get our various annual returns, we think at the end of the 20 years we can sell it to another party for 5 million, that would be the salvage value. Again, the longer the life of a project, the less likely there is a salvage value for 2 reasons. One is the longer the term, the less we know about the future. But 2 is the longer the term, the less likely anything we build and use today will be needed or desired at some future date, way in the future. It's just practical. Too much in industry, too much in business is evolving and changing rapidly to think that in 25 or 30 years, some asset we build and use today for that period of time will have much need in the marketplace. So those are our upfront criteria. Large upfront cash, cash flows per year for a specific number of years, minimum of 5 years life, with the potential of salvage value or not. Those are our choices. And we also can break projects really into 4 different types. And these are a prerequisite project. Prerequisite project is one that must be done before another project. And the most common examples. We want to build a facility in a particular area. Currently, there are no roads or power or sewage to that area. We must build those projects first before we can build our facility. So the road project is a prerequisite. It must be done first before the building project. There are complementary projects. Complementary projects are projects that each benefit the other. A facility to produce a certain product next to a rail project that will bring the raw material to us. If we build those both at the same time, those are complementary. Each needs the other. There are independent projects. We look at a given project, it has no direct relationship to anything else. And that, by the way, is our beginning position on all projects. All projects, as we start to analyze them, are viewed as standalone or independent projects. And the reason is we want to make sure that the given project makes economic sense on its own before we look at any benefit to or from any other project. And frequently we look at projects from the standpoint of being mutually exclusive. What this means is if we do project A, we must give up project B. If we do project B, we must give up project A. This comes into play many, many times when we are looking at a variety of potential projects, knowing we can't do all of them, so that we can choose which ones or which single one is the best project for us. So we analyze each of them knowing we will give up the alternatives. So that's our basic approach.